Welcome everyone. Scott Dean is my name. I'm the CEO of Learning Seat, and we'd just like to welcome everyone here this morning. And thanks for taking the time to be here. I believe, which is typical of Melbourne, there's an accident out west which is causing a bit of mayhem on the road, so we may have a few people joining us post the start. Probably just a bit of payback for yesterday for any of us who live out in the east who got stuck on the Monash coming yesterday, so which I was about 500 metres behind that accident when it happened. So great. This morning we're going to have a presentation from Raph, James and Claire. This is part of a series of information days that we've been running. About 12, 18 months ago we decided that it was really important for us to sort of turn our business inside out and give our clients more of an insight as to what we do and how we put our courses together. So just to give you an understanding of, I guess, some of the talent that sits behind the scenes here, and not necessarily what you see from some of the stuff we produce, and maybe just from our salespeople, but people, a lot of the creative people that sit behind the business here as well, which we think is important for everyone to understand how we do it, and more importantly, if it can help you in terms of what you need to do inside your businesses as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Raph and let him take it away. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Scott. Welcome everyone. As Scott just said, thank you all for attending. It's early and there have been some challenges getting in. My name is Raph Dolanowski. I'm the Group Manager of Digital Education Solutions here at Learning Seat. That effectively means it's the role I get to work for the digital and instructional team, and ultimately get to see the amazing work they do and celebrate that. So just a quick overview of today's presentation. Brief introduction from myself. I won't say too much because these guys are the experts. Claire will cover off the key learning principles that we apply here at Learning Seat to whatever we do. James will cover off some of the key visual principles we use to complement all our training. And then there'll be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end of the session, so any questions you have, we'll be able to answer that for you then. So what are we talking about today? I guess is question number one. As the title suggests cheekily, it's something that is discussed quite a lot online in terms of what's the best way to approach e-learning, what are the key principles, is it adult learning principles, is it something else, is it nested in traditional learning, is it a new type of learning? We're looking to talk about that, but ultimately it's going to be the principles we apply at Learning Seat, and we're going to talk about why we apply those, what the background is behind those principles, and we're also going to talk through a few examples in terms of what we've implemented for our work, but also some examples in real life where there's a principle that kind of carries through in terms of what you do in your day-to-day and how we apply that to our learning. But before we dive into the details, for us, there's an important step before we start applying all the principles, and it's making sure you go into a project with the right approach. For us, e-learning is not a product, it's a service. It's the journey in getting to that product. That journey for us is really about a partnership. You as an organisation have the knowledge around what works for your organisation and what that subject matter is. We've got the knowledge on how to take that information and make it effectively work online. Our approach is quite simple. We listen to you, we design, and then we deliver on what we talked about. When I say we listen, obviously everyone listens, but what does that mean? So we appreciate that what we create is part of a bigger picture. What we create for you is a small part of a larger strategy they have in training, and we need to appreciate that and understand that to ensure that the bit that we create suits the rest of your strategy. We need to understand who your people are. Obviously, they're the audience for the training that's been created. Critically understanding that audience is pretty much the make or break of a course. If we create a piece of learning that's amazing for a different audience, your audience is never going to relate. So we talk to you about your people, what they like, what they don't like, why they work for your organisation, and what their values are. We also speak about, okay, We know a lot of organisations have had e-learning before. What has been your experience so far? Some organisations have had really positive experiences and they're very mature in e-learning. They understand how it can complement their strategy. Other organisations are quite early on in their adoption of e-learning and they need a little bit more guidance. We need to understand what has worked for you, what hasn't, and if the solution we're creating is something to break the mould that you're expecting, or is it something to kind of go in line with your larger strategy? Obvious question, we need to understand what you're trying to achieve. Very often we find that this is something that perhaps isn't clearly defined for projects. What's the purpose of this project? Oh, we just need to put this content online. Why are we getting that content online? So that's something we need to drill down and really understand what are we trying to achieve with the end solution to make sure that we can then measure it against the success for that project, just to make sure that you're getting your ROI, obviously, on your investment. Then we talk a little bit. The talking we do is generally setting expectations. So again, this is a partnership. We want to make sure that both parties understand what you can expect of us and what we're going to expect of you. In terms of the expectations of you, it's probably around we need to know who we'll be talking to, who's our subject matter expert, who the stakeholders will be, are there any stakeholders later down the track. Obviously we want to avoid situations where the final stakeholder hasn't had input at the start and they kind of go, no, we don't like this, which has happened in the past. So it's something that's very important to make sure everyone understands who's involved at what stages. In terms of the expectations of us, we tell you how we're going to do it, we tell you what deliverables you can expect, and obviously we tell you how long it's going to take to create the piece. That's everything from me. I'll now hand over to Claire, who's our instructional designer, and she'll talk through more exciting stuff.
That's right. Okay. Moving along from this. All right, key e-learning principles. I'm just going to take you through 6 of them before we go into detail. Number 1, tell a story. Number 2, keep it simple. Number 3, keep it relevant. Number 4, make it personal. 5, prompt decision making. And 6, treat learners as adults. So I'm going to take you through these. I could talk for hours, but I won't. Lucky for you. So I'm just going to talk about 6 of the really key ones that we use at Learning Seed. Okay, now, let's face it, in some quarters e-learning has a bad reputation. This constant sort of clickety-click, we've all been there, you sit through, you think, oh God, here we go, I've got to do this again, click, 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 retry, click. And, I can give you an example. At a previous workplace I was at, we had to do years ago, we had to do a sexual harassment course. And I remember that my workmates and I literally had a competition to see who could finish it quickly. Now, needless to say, there was no behavioural change. That course was not successful. And that was also pretty obvious by what happened at the Christmas party that year. But I won't get into that. And it didn't work because there was no interaction. It was just completely passive. Screens of text and boring sort of eye stock images. And importantly, no one was engaged at all because no one learned. So how do we make it engaging? How do we make e-learning engaging? How do we make sure that our learning meets learners' needs and ultimately the needs of the business? How do we ensure that e-learning results in measurable behavioural change? Behavioural change. We apply these basic principles. Okay, number 1. Tell a story. Now, we all, if you're like me, we've all got family stories that we go talk about again and again over the kitchen table. I know my family's got just hundreds that we debate about and we argue and say, no, this isn't what happened, this is what happened. And we do that because stories resonate with all of us. And that's why narrative works so well. People are naturally drawn to stories. It's part of every culture. And more importantly, we're designed to learn from stories. From the time we're old enough to understand our caregivers, we're told cautionary tales. I had my great uncle Lawrence lost his finger after he dropped a grate on it in Belfast back in the 1930s. Well, I tell you what, my mum used that story to stop us from all sorts of safety mishaps. All the time it was, oh, you know what happened to Uncle Lawrence? Don't do that, no, you'll lose a finger like Uncle Lawrence. Of course, we never thought that, there can't be so many examples. How many times can the man lose his finger? But, the lesson's there. And in e-learning, stories help us see something from someone else's perspective. They allow us to experience risk, to see consequences. And they help us make sense of or process information and work people out. There's some of the research for you. I mean, you see it every day. Even on like a first date with someone, the first question is, what's your story? That's what you're there to work out. You go to an interview, essentially, it's what's your story? Now, all these examples show how stories help us understand others. And in fact, research from the New School for Social Research found that reading literary fiction by writers like Dickens sharpens our ability to understand each other's emotions. Now, that doesn't apply to Jeffrey Archer. Okay, so this is just literary fiction. So the use of stories is even backed up. The use of stories in e-learning is even backed up by research. A study from Florida compared learning outcomes for an online course that used a storytelling approach with an online course that didn't. And the results indicated that learners who did the storytelling course reported much better engagement. In fact, it led to higher perceived levels of attention, relevance, confidence, satisfaction, and motivation. But how do we apply it? How do we apply stories? Well, there are heaps of ways. And it doesn't have to be complex. There are scenarios where you put learners in a realistic work situation and have them confronted with the decision that they need to make. Narrative arcs, classic sort of structure to a story where you have exposition, then a climax and then a resolution. Basic sort of character viewpoints, you can include multifaceted characters, dialogue, realistic dialogue, all sorts of things. I'll take you through a couple of examples. Some of you might recognise this. This is our compliance suite, the save files. This is the ultimate in storytelling. This was the whole suite took a graphic narrative approach. And it's just so effective. You can see here, there's this whole story setup and the emotion in this. And from a design perspective, it looks fantastic. And the framing helps us sort of chunk the content as well, so it's easy to digest. Here's another example. This is from our plant safety course. This was a work health and safety course. So here, at the start of each section, we had a perspective from someone who was personally affected by a work health and safety breach. And you can see how effective this is. We have Sarah here who talks about how her son was killed in a workplace accident at a local paper mill in a rural area where they lived. And that didn't even take long to put together. It's really, really simple stuff. So, next principle, keep it simple. I think we can all agree with that. Minimise text, simple design, and eliminate unnecessary audio. It's pretty basic. Ultimately, bells and whistles doesn't necessarily make great e-learning. It's good to be immersive, but it needs to be well thought out. Ultimately, it's about the message. Or as a marketing person might say, less sizzle, more sausage. So keep it simple so learners aren't overwhelmed. It comes down to cognitive load. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. It's the idea that learners have to process information by their sensory memory, so what they can feel, what they can see, what they can hear, before it embeds in their working memory and finally in their long-term memory. Now, there's intrinsic and extraneous load. So intrinsic load is when the working memory is kind of imposed upon by the learning task, by the nature of the information. Then there's extraneous load, how the learning is presented. Now, at Learning Seed, that's what we've got control over. So any way we can minimise that extraneous load by keeping it simple is perfect. And I'll give you an everyday example. Listicles on the internet. We all complain about them. 10 ways to make your selfies pop. 6 ways to build your Twitter followers. We all complain about it, but we read them. Why? Because they're easy to digest. It's simple. It's not a burden. Now, I'll give you another example. I was thinking about this the other day. Me doing a course on algebra, and I'm talking like year 7 algebra. If I had screen after screen of theory, I would find that really, really difficult to digest. But you give me some worked examples in there, you take me through it, use scaffolding, I'm good to go. And this whole idea of cognitive load is also sort of talked about by Ruth Clark and the coherence principle. Her message is essentially to avoid adding extra material that doesn't support the instructional goal. Avoid extraneous audio, extraneous graphics, and extraneous words. I know that what we try and do at Learning Seed is ask ourselves, is this improving the learning, or are we just showing off? It needs to be function over form. Applying it, just to recap, minimise text, use uncluttered visual design, helps to have a brilliant designer like James, and eliminate audio and visuals that you don't need. Okay, I'll give you an example now. This is a course we did for ACON in the New South Wales Community Health Organisation. It was on LGBTI training for aged care. Now, we got a lot of content from the client, from ACON. They had a couple of training manuals, pretty dense stuff. They did have some fantastic statistics. And what we were able to do is take that information and break it down into some really easily digestible infographics. And you can see how easy this is to understand. I mean, if this was just an iStock photo and 200 words of text, it's not going to resonate as well. Keep moving along. Number 3, keep it relevant. We've got to make learning experiences that are relevant and authentic. And for e-learning, this means mimicking the work environment as much as possible. And look, this applies to images, to video, to audio, to anything that you add to e-learning. And it all sort of comes back to constructivism. The idea that learning is an active process in which learners develop new ideas and concepts based on their knowledge and life experiences. It's the way people are born to learn. I mean, you can see this in the 70-20-10 principle. Any of you familiar with that? Yeah. Basically that 70%, that people learn 70% from tough jobs, 20% from people, and 10% from courses and reading. So what that means is we have to mimic the work environment. We have to make our e-learning real for it to work. And at Learning Seed, we try to make everything authentic, and we challenge learners with realistic tasks. And that's why we get inside the mind of our learners through consulting really closely with our subject matter experts. After all, they're the ones who understand. They know the kind of wrong decisions people are making in the workplace and why they're making it. And if we can find that out, we can address it. An example of that is a privacy course that we did for the TAC. We created a course with them for their claims staff. Now, it's interesting because their claims staff often have to deal with people who are upset, emotional on the phone. They're dealing with personal and health information and some really sensitive matters at times. So what we did So we sat down with TAC and we talked to them about their people. What are their challenges? What is their work environment like? How's your workplace structured? What are the most common errors that people are making? Why are they making them? And that helped us create realism. So, to recap, just show you that. To recap, mimic the work environment and create real world situations and challenges. Here's a really just basic example of how you can sort of create relevant e-learning. This is just a visual menu at the start of a course. St Ives is an aged care organisation that we worked with, and this was their induction. And what we have here, as I said, is a visual menu that basically shows a sort of, well, it's a microcosm of a retirement village. And immediately, learners can sort of recognise it. And that was pretty easy to put together, especially with the help of a great designer. Number 4, make it personal. Now, I don't know about you, but I can sit for 10 minutes and watch a mashup of kittens and puppies on the internet. But if you make me watch, 1 minute of a video on the age, I can't be bothered. But why will I watch the kitten videos? Why will we do that? Because it pulls on the heartstrings. You can't help it. You see it in advertising as well. I was thinking the other day about, I don't know if you guys remember this, but back in the 90s there was an ad campaign by Nescafe. Do you remember that? And it showed a series of stages in this family. It was just wonderful. So, you see it everywhere. And it was really effective. Because it's personal and it connects. Now, many e-learning courses are sort of conversions of existing training manuals, policies, documents, processes. And it means a whole lot of courses use the same technical or legalistic language. But why take all that content and put it on screen? Why not take that opportunity to connect with learners? If it wasn't working, clearly it wasn't working in a training manual necessarily. Why would it work to just transfer that to screen? And why not take advantage of what e-learning offers? It's about changing the delivery. And one way to make it personal is to use emotion. Encourage learners to reflect. Have them question their assumptions and their reality. Ask them, how would you feel if this happened? What would you do if this were your family? Another really simple way is to use conversational language. Reduces cognitive load and sets the tone. And it means steering clear of third person, using second person when you can, and always using active voice. And, research has shown, in fact, that people work harder to understand material when they feel they're in conversation with a partner, rather than simply receiving information. And it works because learning is not just about information delivery. It's about priming people for learning and establishing a relationship. To cover that off, be conversational, use characters and facilitators, that's another really great way, and use emotion. Here's an example. Now, this is the TAC privacy course. And at the start of each section, the learner received an iPhone call from a distressed member of a distressed TAC client, I should say. And this was really effective at not only mimicking the work environment, but getting across that real emotion and the consequences when privacy breaches occur. Raph, would you mind playing the sound?
Hello, Miss Fox. My name's Brenda Croxton. I'm calling to let you know that I believe the TAC has breached my privacy, and it's not right. It's not right at all. I was in a car crash a couple of years ago, and since then, the TAC's been paying for my treatment for anxiety and depression. I separated from my husband just after the accident. He's a violent man, and we've been in a custody battle over our 2 kids ever since. My husband called the TAC and he asked for copies of reports from my psychiatrist and my psychologist. He told the TAC that he was concerned about my mental health and he wanted to help me. The TAC went right ahead and gave the reports to him and then he used them against me in a custody hearing in court. I was publicly humiliated. I never gave the TAC permission to talk to him about my claim or give him access to my personal health information. Is there anything you can do to help me?
Okay, so you can hear the emotion in that. And I know that seems full on, but this is the kind of thing that the staff have to deal with. It just shows you, I think, how fantastic emotion can be in e-learning. Here's another example, just going back to that ACON course earlier. Now this is just really simple to put together. And this sort of harks back to that whole idea of self-reflection, getting people to apply what they're learning to real life. Very simple, very easy to do. You know, you don't need a big budget to do anything like this. Again, same course. You can see how personal this is. We've got a story from Brian and the difficulties he's faced with his partner Norm and dealing with staff in an aged care facility. This also shows you how well story can work. And again, you know, it was really, really easy to get these stories from ACON. You know, we had all this material available to us. Okay, moving on. Number 5, prompt decision making. Now we've all kind of done compliance courses like bullying, for example, and you'll get to a learning check and it'll say something like, what are your obligations under the legislation? Select from the list. Now that's one way to test learners, that's one way. But why not give them a realistic situation and get them to make a decision and allow them to see the consequences of that decision? Instead, you might say, you know, you see Raf punch James at a seminar on e-learning. What should you do?
Coming up next.
You know, yeah. What should you do? Now that's just so much more effective because you're getting people to think, you know, what would I do? And importantly, once they make that decision, once they select their choice, they see the consequences. You tell them as a result of that choice, you see this happen. You know, James ends up reporting it to Fair Work Australia. You know, and that's a fantastic thing about adult learning, is you can treat people as adults. So ultimately, when you get people to make decisions, it means you get them to learn the way we all do in real life. We don't go through life selecting from multiple choice lists. We learn from our decisions, we learn from our mistakes. And we shouldn't be scared to let learners make those mistakes. So what I described before, and I mentioned earlier, is a type of scenario activity. You're probably all familiar with it. Basically has 3 main ingredients. A character faces a realistic decision, makes a decision, and receives feedback, and sees the consequences of their decision in that feedback. It forces learners to apply mental models, and it results in behavioural change, the ultimate goal. Back to ACON. This is actually my mum. We like to pull in our family members for our courses, the characters. So what you've got here is Sharon. She was the course facilitator for this course. And in each section she was posed with an increasingly difficult scenario. And I like this because she's a realistic character for someone who works in aged care. So it kind of engages the learner. And it's sort of, she acts as a kind of guide as well. And you can see we've got a scenario here in which Sharon's asked to make a decision about what she should do in order to be sensitive. She's given options. Now, not only is she sort of given actions to take, but she's given dialogue. So, which adds, I think, that extra level of realism and complexity. Obviously, a decision's made. And we get some really specific feedback, useful feedback. Now, this kind of leads into the last principle. Treat learners as adults. We occasionally get clients saying, we need learners to learn absolutely everything. We need all this information on screen, all of it. Now, of course, you can do that. But, and I can see someone nodding here, but you've got no way of really knowing if people are taking it in. It's better to treat learners as adults. Give them control where you can. Give them control over their learning. And, speak to them as adults. And as I mentioned earlier, the fantastic thing about adult learning is that adults have the benefit of all these life experiences that they can draw on when exploring courses. And that's one of the really fun things about creating adult learning. Now, to give learners control, at Learning Seat, we like to let them skip over what they don't need and explore where possible. Don't log everything down. Don't make everything mandatory. Give them what they need when they need it. I think you'll often hear this referred to as just-in-time learning. And really, this kind of mimics the way we work, the way we access information in real life. Now if you want to know something, you go straight to Google. You search for it, and the answer's there. You search for what you need when you need it. Not so helpful when you're diagnosing medical conditions. Please do not do that. I've got myself into a world of pain by doing that. But it's simple. Having said that, I will say that it is important to also bear in mind what learners you're dealing with and their experience. Immersive learning is fantastic, but if people are totally confused, that's not going to work. So I will say, give guidance where it's needed. You can use information markers, you can highlight things. Any way you can guide learners is better. And in fact, work with your digital designers. And the other way to treat learners as adults is, again, giving learning checks that help them engage the seriousness of their decisions via feedback. So, no more warn and scorn. Don't go too heavy on the retries. Don't force them to go back. Give them the feedback they need so they can see immediately what they did wrong and how they can fix it. So, to recap, give learners control over their learning with guidance as needed. Have them access learning when they need it. And give them realistic, specific feedback. It's that easy. I'm just going to give you one final example. This is TAC privacy again. Now this is essentially, as you can see, a sort of desk setup. This is basically a section menu at the start of each section. Now what you've got is different digital artefacts. When learners select these artefacts, they receive information. And they receive it in different ways. So we've got a newspaper over here, an iPad, it's a video, iPhone, you saw the iPhone call earlier, and you've got a case file. And in some sections we have an email coming up on the laptop. So the great thing about this is that they can sort of explore this. Now they do, again, we've got guidance here, so they do have to look at them all. But they get to see all these different pieces of information, and then they're given learning checks, which basically requires them to sort of think about what they've learned and apply a schema or a sort of mental model. Here's an example of the newspaper article. Here we've got an email, case notes, and top tips, giving people a way to access more information if they need it. So finally, just to recap, tell a story, keep it simple, keep it relevant, make it personal, prompt decision making, and treat learners as adults. Thank you, and I'll hand over to James.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, my name is James. I'm the Senior Digital Designer in Learning Seed. Can you guys hear me at the back?
Yes.
Yep, cool. So I'm excited to share with you about some of the key visual design principles that our digital team use on a day-to-day basis to create engaging e-learning. So there are 4 key principles that I'll be talking about today. Okay. Firstly, visual design fosters a positive mood. Research shows that it takes only 1/10 of a second to form an impression of a person. Right? E-learning course is no different. So getting your learners motivated and engaged right from the beginning plays an important role in the overall learning experience. So, first principle, visual design fosters a positive mood. Research shows that putting people in the positive mood will make them more creative, more flexible in their thinking, more thorough, and better learners. So how do we present content to our learners so that our learners will be in a positive mood? Dumb Ways to Die is a campaign by Metro Trains in Melbourne to promote safety around train. The aim of it is to engage a group of audience who don't really want to listen to any kind of safety messages. Okay? So it uses a group of humorous, friendly characters like this, nice colors, with relatable personality. Right? As you can see, it's got earphones over here. They're dancing, and some are bubbly and some are not so. The campaign turns out to be a huge success. This video has close to 100 million views. And what's most important is that people have feedback that they feel safer around trains because of this campaign. SafeOut's approach to aesthetics can be seen through a full-colored, illustrated graphic novel. Firstly, the background is setting a scene. It's almost like Batman in Gotham City. Right? It's dark. And then suddenly 2 characters appear. Alright, the lady on the left is smiling. The guy looks grumpy. What's going to happen next? So it demonstrates a fun and engaging way to connect with our learners and ultimately effective learning. To date, Save Files has more than 500,000 enrollments and is still increasing. The progress bar in our Save Files course is also designed consistent to the theme. The street lamps over here give the learner an indication of where they have progressed through the course. All right. Likewise, for the navigation buttons, we've got next and back buttons designed like billboards. Our second principle, visual design improves usability. For the benefit of those who don't live in Victoria, this machine can be found in all Victoria railway stations. Okay? It allows passengers to top up their MyKey card, which is a mode of payment and a mode of ticket validation. All right? Just before they hop onto the train. So, may I know who in this room thinks that this is a successful outcome? Design outcome. Okay, so hang on to that thought for now. We'll park this for now, we'll come back to this later on. So in order to improve usability, first we need to understand our learners. We need to understand how our learners use our courses. Are they going to use it on desktops, laptops, or iPads, or something else? No, there's so many devices out there. And then, how familiar are our learners with computers, with using computers? Okay, there are some general rules to follow, and one of them is to keep our course interface simple. All right, keep it simple. Claire has talked about this just now. Again, it applies to visual design. Good visual design not only draws our learners' attention, it also makes interface easy to use. So that our learners can focus on important content rather than how to navigate through the course. Jeff Johnson, in his book Designing with the Mind in Mind, he mentioned that websites should not call attention to themselves. Instead, they should fade into the background, allowing users to focus on their own goals. Another rule involves moving from one screen to the other using clear and persistent navigation. This means that the navigation buttons stay consistent, all right, from one screen to the other, and be its position or scale, color, or just general look and feel. A course that we did for Aecon LGBTI training for the aged care sector. At the beginning of each course, learners are presented with pop-up balloons like this, all right, indicating where the respective navigations are. This is another screen. As you can see, the buttons stay strictly consistent throughout these two screens and throughout both course. Once the learner gets used to the navigations on the first few screens, they should then be able to easily navigate through the course without any problems at all. So, and by isolating the navigation buttons, it creates a distinction from the rest of the graphics, making it more apparent to the learners. Third point, visual design manages details. We know that too much text on screen can be hard to read and also distract our learners from effective learning. But what happens if the whole paragraph of text like this is important and there's absolutely no way to reduce it down any further? This is where visual design can come in and be used to break text down into smaller, digestible bits. In an online induction that we built for Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, paragraph of text is broken down into smaller chunks like this, so that they can fit into a dialogue balloon like this. Learners are constantly engaged with this smaller chunk of text, which is then complemented by a banking representative and illustrations that set the banking scene. As we did our photography in-house, we can tailor poses, gestures to suit our content better. Interactive activities can also be used to break text down into smaller digestible bits. In this example, we've got two hotspots. Learners can interact with these hotspots to review more detailed information. This is an example. So it presents information in a way that it does not overwhelm our learners. Our fourth principle speaks about how visual design highlights important information. How do we do that? Firstly, through understanding our users' reading patterns and good use of visual hierarchy. In today's context, we tend to scan through online articles, websites very quickly. Okay? So good visual hierarchy directs learners to critical information and arrange the information in such a way that we can quickly skim through and absorb what we need, absorb the important information in an efficient manner. Let's go back to our previous example of my key system, pop-up machine. Who still think that it's a good design outcome? Alright, I think as a first-time user, and then when I approach to this machine, the first thing that come across my mind is there are three boxes, blue boxes of similar scale. Alright, we've got one here, and one here. So the blue boxes causes my eyes to stray in between them constantly. But based on my reading habits, alright, I read from top down, I read from left to right. So eventually I find myself reading from top left hand corner. I saw this thing. So for the benefits of those who cannot read, this says, on the first point it says, place my key on reader below. Okay, so my eyes, alright, place my key in a reader below. So my eyes go down, and the first thing I see is the zoom, big zoom sign. That's not where I place my key, cut. I look at the monitor, I try to place my key there, doesn't work. Alright, since it says below, so I go down furthermore, I go to this pocket over here. No, that's not my key. reader. That's not a cradle where I put my key. Next thing I do is my eyes straight to the right. I find myself place my key here. And I found the cradle. So it takes me as a new user at least 5 steps for me to actually find a way to put my key card. So that's not a good use of visual hierarchy, I don't think. And that's not understanding our user reading patterns either. Effective visual hierarchy can be achieved by using typography, color, scale, alignment, position, and even motion. Elements of the highest rank in the visual hierarchy is the most noticeable. Hence, the heading and the subheading are usually represented with a larger font, a different color, or is usually bold. Once again, back to the Acorn example that Claire was showing just now. As you can see, text on the left is treated with a larger typeface. And the white space around it, it actually gives emphasis to the text. It isolates the text. And a strong image on the right. Okay? Very simple screen, very simple treatment, but the result is clean and yet effective. Another example. Very simple screen with just text and image. Larger header, smaller body text, and a simple image on the right. So to summarize, our 4 key visual design principles. First, visual design fosters a positive mood. Second, visual design improves usability. Third, visual design manages detail. And fourth, visual design highlights important information. Thank you. I'll pass the time back to Ralph.
All right, wow, fantastic work there by James and Claire. Questions from anyone in regards to that material or any other questions you might have related to how we produce learning or any of the principles? Is that required? We've got a plant up the back.
I guess it depends on, learning outcomes. Yeah, it really is the ID decision. I think at the end it's to what's the learning outcome? Is because photograph is more relatable, it's more realistic. All right. So if you want to portray it's more sort of intimately close. It's like an online facilitator that speaks to you. It's like when you're doing a face-to-face training, you talk to a live facilitator. Similarly to this online course, using a photograph will create that kind of online intimate experience. Whereas some instances where you can't use a photograph to represent, using illustrations to be great. In terms of perspective, in terms of diagrams. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Can I just talk about that as well?
Yeah.
I think the other thing to consider, I think absolutely all that's true, but also I think a lot of it depends on the subject matter. So if you've got content that's really dry, illustrations and sort of even a cartooning style can help. But I think if you're dealing with sensitive material, there's a risk when you use illustrations that you're making light of a very serious topic. So I think that's something else bear in mind. Yeah.
Yes.
Equally.
I think again that comes down to the initial stages of understanding who the audience is, and then I guess having a common sense approach to it. So for example, if we know, okay, we've got a part of the demographic that is, for example, vision impaired is probably one of the common ones, colour blindness in particular, we can take that on board obviously and go, okay, great, that's something we'll be mindful of. The way we design the interface, for example, is making sure that we don't only indicate some sort of change through colour, so there'll be colour and visual shift in terms of the shape changing or something like that. For hearing impairment, again, it's ensuring if we have any dialogue, so if we have videos or we have, for example, the phone call that Claire did, if the client says we know part of our audience is going to be hearing impaired, or they'll be performing this course in an environment that they won't have speakers and all that sort of thing, adding in subtitles or adding a transcript. And again, that's a bit more of a decision thing. If it's fairly conversational content, then subtitles are quite acceptable in terms of most people are quite familiar with it. If it's probably heavier content, you want a transcript because someone might listen to it and then they want to just reread it a few times, just ease of access. At the moment, we use Storyline. We've just upgraded to 2. We found that we kind of approached Storyline with a bit of a pessimistic view. We kind of went in there and we looked at a lot of the tutorials and examples online, and we were struggling to find, I guess, something that we really connected with in terms of styling it visually and all that sort of thing. But ultimately, once we got into the program and we had the likes of James and the rest of the digital team get in there and start applying really solid visual design principles, we found that we weren't very limited in terms of what we wanted to do. So we'd come across from Flash and went to Storyline. And we've had very successful projects in terms of obviously the instructional component going well, but visually applying what we want to. And I guess for now we haven't hit that challenge. The moment we hit that challenge and we go, Storyline is preventing us from doing this, that's when we're going to branch out and go, right, what's the next thing to tackle? Yes? We probably haven't had any strict requirements to say this is going to be training delivered in a facilitated session. We have had some instances where a client has identified that this training will be usually just a one-on-one sort of experience for the learner with a computer, and it may also be used in a facilitated session. From there, there's probably just considerations around interaction, obviously, that take place. In terms of, I guess, the flow and structure of the content, there aren't too many, I guess, being mindful that the facilitator's going to want to get their bit in there. So we probably design it slightly different. I guess it's again going to the point of the audience. Okay, are we designing a piece that's specifically, predominantly for someone who's going to be doing it by themselves? We don't want to impact their experience to accommodate the facilitated session. So ultimately, if we did just kind of say this is going to be 50 with 50, we'd probably suggest having a slightly different approach for each one. Because for a facilitator, they're going to need slightly different content, probably less of it on screen and more of them being able to communicate it to the group. And for the one-on-one session, obviously everything has to be kind of covered off. Interestingly, you mentioned that we actually at the moment are working on a proposal for a client which they're looking for that exact sort of experience where they're going to have a group of people in an immersive environment, and there's going to be a facilitator leading them through it. And then at some points there's going to be learner interaction needed. And with this one, this is probably quite exciting for us because it's a different approach, but what we're suggesting is the facilitated session is one environment, and then all the learners in that environment have an iPad, and at critical points they're asked to complete a learning check or an assessment on their iPad, and I guess that allows everyone to get the benefit of actually testing their knowledge while still being involved in their own experience. Yes. Okay. I'll do the cliche, how long's a piece of string though? I guess again, it depends on the needs of the client, how available that client is to us, and what the state of their content is. We're very flexible in terms of a client saying, we need a course in 6-8 weeks. Well, okay, fantastic. Here's the things we know that we need to set up in terms of expectations to make sure that goes along. I guess the challenge would be if we had a client that say, hey, we need a course in 4 weeks and we don't have any content, we're probably waving a bit of a flag at that point going, okay, it's probably going to take us 1-2 weeks to get that content in shape to form the basis of the project and go from there. But again, it's depending what the needs are specifically, we're able to be flexible. For bigger projects, I mean, we've had some projects that have gone 4 or 5 months, and they were kind of complex ones that needed a lot of client sort of consultation, a bit of back and forth, and bigger stakeholder groups. We find that usually slows down the progress of a project. So we'll have a project where there's one stakeholder group, one stakeholder owning it, goes very quickly, review times are brought down. We have a stakeholder group where there's multiple levels, and it starts to blow out because one, people's time is precious and not everyone's going to be able to do it between 2 and 5 on the Tuesday. The other thing is consolidation of feedback. So that's something that the client needs to probably make a few decisions once everyone puts in their 2 cents, and that kind of holds it up. Anything else? So the way we approach our development is every project has a team. So there'll be obviously a project manager to keep things on track for us, keep the creatives in check. There'll be the instructional designer and the digital designer working very closely together in coming up with a concept. As we saw in the presentation, making sure the visual and the content itself comes together is important. So it's very much a collaboration between our team internally and then a lot of client collaboration. We love talking to our clients. We know you guys are the ones who actually know what you're trying to achieve, what your content is. But yeah, every time we've got a team, and then obviously we have QA points and all that. So seniors to make sure that everything's at the quality that we need it to, peer reviews to get perspectives. So ultimately, when you start to add up the team, that everyone who's involved in touching a piece, there's probably 5-6 people who have some way contributed to ensuring that piece is the best we can deliver. I'll just raise one kind of planted question. So a common thing we get is, I guess, budget. I think that's always the exciting sort of topic. Okay, well, can we apply all this with a limited budget? Yes. In short, essentially it's about ensuring that, again, the state of the content, what the expectations are, and making sure that investment is in the right spots, but also setting expectations around how we can deliver the most with the budget. So for example, if we have a client that has a lot of faith and trust in us delivering a piece, there's probably a few milestones and a few deliverables that don't take quite as much fleshing out, which means we find efficiencies and we're still able to invest the correct amount of ID time and visual time into a piece. And I guess the point of the presentation is a lot of the time, I guess the request is sort of, we've got a limited budget, we've got a lot of content, we want all the bells and whistles. We probably say pick 2, mostly because the bells and whistles is really the least beneficial to a piece. The critical bit is always going to be the idea, the content, taking what you have and making it work online. I use the example of, when you're reading a book, well, unless you really like comics, but you don't need a picture every so often to keep you interested in the book. It's the content that grabs you. And the format of the book, no matter which book you pick up, is largely the same. So the visual treatment, whilst is important, ensuring that the format's right, consistent navigation, good visual hierarchy, how far we go with the visual concept is probably less important than how far we go with the instructional treatment and the instructional content. Claire?
Yeah.
I might just hand over to my esteemed colleague Michael, because I know he's got some views on this. Michael's one of our other instructional designers.
Hi. I think further to Ralph talking about the content, if the content is dry, the context is the most important thing. And further to what Claire's talked about, you add relatable scenarios to that, you add information that suits the learner who's doing it. If it's their job, it's not dry to them, they understand it, if they can relate to it, it lifts the content. So if you take raw content and put it on the screen, I think that's when you're in a bit of trouble. So a lot of the work of the ID is to work with the subject matter expert and bring it to life. And that's how, like, a lot of content is dry, raw, when you treat it, and when you add the visual treatment as well, it becomes a course and it comes alive.
And just further to that point, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think context and ensuring that a learner understands why they have to do something is probably a big piece for us. So we recently were having a chat with an organisation who have got a challenge around they're people who are in client-facing roles. They're people who kind of provide support and all that to a particular demographic. They have to use a system to log details, and it's quite tedious. And I have to put in this and this, and I have to find this information. Ultimately, what ends up happening is the data that's collected via this system isn't particularly good, because the group entering the information doesn't know why they're doing it, short of it's just an admin task. So our objective there is to go to the learners and go, okay, we know this is never going to be a pleasant experience, you do have to enter some data. The reason you're doing it, and this is where we want to collect it with the learner, is ultimately when you collect that data and when you log it, the end benefit of doing it properly is that the person you're providing that service to ends up with a better service. There's better data, and there's a better understanding. It means when that person moves around, that information tracks them. So it's kind of building that sort of perspective of the reason you're doing is ultimately for the person you're working for. This isn't, it's a formality of a task to enter them information, but you're doing it for the best interest of the person you're looking after. And that starts to build a connection for the learner. So for example, in terms of data analysis, it's kind of saying, okay, what ultimately ends up happening with this data? Why is it important that we get outcomes from this? Get the learner to connect with that, and then I guess you change the motivators for them through that course. Rather than, I have to do this course because at the end of it I'll get a tick, it becomes, I'll do this course because I'll be able to do my job better, and the ultimate result of that is the data will be better and there'll be X benefit. No worries. Anything else? Anything from out the back there? No? All right. Well, if there's no further questions, please keep helping yourselves to the various delicious things at the back of the room. Other than that, all of us will be available to answer any more specific questions you have. And obviously we have the fantastic sales team wandering around the room as well, who will give you some support. Thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure.
It's just like throwing.
We've had a question from Jessica. I'll hand this one over to Claire, I think.
I think, Jessica, that it really just depends on the material and your learning outcomes. I think that when it comes to using stories in e-learning, it doesn't have to be highfalutin. You can use short snippets if you need. Ultimately it does come down on what you want to achieve and the behaviour you want to see. I hope that sort of answers your question.
We've had 2 more questions come through. We've got a question from Jessica Tyson. Yeah, so I think from that perspective again, ultimately the overarching design needs to be consistent. To James's point during his presentation, once a learner is familiar with an interface and how to navigate a course, we want to leverage that knowledge as much as possible. So it certainly wouldn't make sense to have one course where the buttons were bottom left and then the next where the buttons are bottom right. However, you do have a little bit of freedom in terms of what the theme of the course is, probably, I guess, is the best way of talking to it. Where we, for example, have a series of courses. The design from a navigation, layout and overarching concept is the same, but each of the courses will have something to differentiate them. So maybe a different hero colour or a slightly different background, or maybe different characters used. So I think you certainly don't want to present learners with completely different designs, because they'll just find that frustrating where they've learned how to use one interface and those modules will obviously be rolled out in succession, and then they have to relearn how to use these courses time and time again. It's a very good question.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Ralph. And I guess the other point is your company will probably have their own set of branding. So I guess leveraging your company style guide or branding will develop a set of look that is consistent to your branding. And as well as to Ralph's point, if we have got multiple courses, we can use a color that identifies different shades between them, but then the whole look and feel, the whole suite should look consistent.
Okay. We've got two very good questions from David Wood. The first one is, how about the use of humour? Where do you stand on it in e-learning? And the second question is, I think we can probably cover off the two, is for a highly conservative industry like finance, how would you go about selling a graphic novel style program? I think these ones I'll allow Claire to answer.
They're great questions, David. First off, on humour, absolutely I think humour has a place in e-learning. I mean, I think it has to be carefully deployed because you need to consider the subject matter, of course. But I think the fantastic thing about humour is that not only does it resonate, but when learners see it, they're surprised. And that's always a fantastic way, I think, to engage people. And David, as for your question about how you would use a graphic novel style approach for a highly conservative industry like finance, look, it's difficult to answer. I think that sort of without knowing the parameters of the project, I can't answer that. I will say that, where there's a will, there's a way. And I know that at Learning Seat we would work very closely with our subject matter experts to ensure that the approach we're taking hits the mark and doesn't sort of make light of, some serious material. I hope that kind of answers your questions.
And again, just to further expand on that, yeah, it's very dependent of your audience. I think sometimes one of the challenges is that depending on the client, they will assume that their audience is representative of someone of their level. So very often we'll deal with executives or senior sort of HR people, and they've got a quite conservative approach, and they very much speak on behalf of that organisation. But once you, I guess, dig down and scratch below the surface, and this isn't specifically for a finance industry, but you do find that ultimately the training is being delivered to people who are probably maybe a bit younger and a slightly different demographic, and they kind of appreciate something a bit different to what they're expecting. Obviously the use of a graphic narrative as per the SAFE files would be something that some organisations are challenged with. And then if we were creating a custom solution, it would be going, okay, well, we know that storytelling, that underarching concept, can be complemented in various ways, as in the SAFE files, a graphic narrative, or if that is something that will challenge the organisation too much, we can kind of bring it back and start using, I guess, more realistic photographic assets, which delivers the same message, but again is not I guess, one step too far for maybe that organisation. And I think the thing there is when an organisation's taken that step and explored this new approach, they find that the response from their learners is quite positive. They're able to connect. They have, an emotional response to the stories and the characters, and ultimately they get more of that learning being effective for them because they remember it. Hopefully that answers that question, and a fantastic question. That was really great. We have a question from Jessica Everingham. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Absolutely. I think, as Claire mentioned at the very start of her piece, e-learning is definitely not a sexy word. A lot of organisations have taken that approach where it's just been content that's been presented online, very dry, very text heavy, very learner check heavy, and a lot of retry. And unfortunately, that is, I guess, what we're dealing with when we tackle e-learning, where there's a lot of learners who really, that's what they expect to see. And when we create something, we want to break that mold. We want to gain their engagement in that first tenth of a second. And that's why we invest so heavily in making the course, one, look fantastic and be something different, that as a learner you're sitting there, you open this e-learning expecting something that perhaps isn't quite so exciting, and bam, all of a sudden you've got characters, vibrant colours, an interesting interface, and the content is written in a way that, wow, I get it, I relate. So we're definitely aiming for, I guess, that sort of disruptive creativity. We've got next question, Jessica Tyson. Great question about gamification. Yes, gamification is definitely something that we look for ways of introducing into courses. I think gamification for me, and I'll hand over to Claire in a moment, but we recently had, I think, an article which sort of talked about a few buzzwords, and one of them was that it's sort of one of those words where, depending who you speak to, it's got a slightly different meaning. So for example, some clients will sort of expect that gamification means that the end product looks and feels and works like a game, where whilst that, I guess, would be true, there are elements of gamification that are more subtle. I mean, gamification is ultimately about changing the motivators for that learner, making them want to compete with other learners perhaps, and making the learning a challenge for them, making them want to challenge themselves. So there's little subtle ways you can do that. For example, if it's appropriate, having a timer for a question, having points. If you've got, say, a soft skill course and you're talking to a customer in a scenario, not only giving the feedback but also presenting the learner with a little satisfaction meter for that customer, and all of a sudden all these little things contribute to the gamification experience. Claire, anything further?
Well, I completely agree with you, and you sort of took the words right out of my mouth.
I'll do that sometime.
I think it's absolutely right that there are elements you can use in gamification, but I do think it's also important to think about whether it's actually adding anything. As we mentioned earlier, bells and whistles don't necessarily make fantastic e-learning, so I just think it's that often it's something you really need to think hard before you put it into your course. I mean, Raf used the example of a timer on a question. Now that can be great for certain courses, but it can also add a level of stress to learners, which can actually hinder the achievement of learning outcomes. So, I do, as Raf said, think there are some fantastic elements from gamification, and we do try to employ them, but it does require you to sort of think, is this really aiding the instructional approach? Is this helping learners, or is this just showing off?